Hello, everyone. This is Ben Marchman with NatureLink, and I want to welcome you to the FireKeepers Global Conference, in which we will gather for powerful conversations with cutting-edge experts and thought leaders who will guide you to connect to your truest self and activate your natural gifts. This event is designed to reinstate the importance of carrying our soul-directed vision back into our communities so that ourselves and our communities will flourish. Here you're invited to learn how to seek the guidance of your inner voice so that you can truly understand what it means to live life with purpose. I'm very excited today to talk to Sparrow Hart, who's the director of Circles of Air and Stone. He has led Vision Quests and workshops in the US and Mexico for over 35 years. He is the author of Letters to the River, A Guide to a Dream Worth Living, and the Vision Quest, A Guide's Training Manual, and even the creator of the Mythic Warrior Training Program, and has developed multiple workshops and retreats addressing shamanism, dreaming, the heroic journey, and the deeper meanings and issues of medicine. His own experience includes extensive time in the wilderness, journeys to the Amazon, guiding over 180 vision quests, and undertaking over 35 of his own. The workshops and adventures of the soul offered by Circles of Air and Stone uses teachings and tools drawn from this experience, as well as studies from native and non-native medicine teachers to help people find their passion, purpose, and power, and to discover and claim a dream worth living. You can find more of his information and programs, as well as publications, on his website, questforvision.com. And Sparrow is talking today about his topic, which is the ancient medicine for a modern world. So, welcome. I'm excited.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here. Yeah.
And Sparrow and I were talking a little bit before the interview here. He's from Vermont, but he is in Mexico right now, which is really cool. And so the first question, Sparrow, that I had was, what do you mean by the word medicine?
Yeah, I really want to get, obviously I don't mean, go to the doctor and get a shot or chemotherapy, although in certain situations that's medicine and that's what you need. But nor do I mean the other extreme. Medicine is ayahuasca or psilocybin or what's known as plant medicine. In some instances that's medicine, but the bigger framework I put that word medicine is the medicine is anything that moves or brings you closer to wholeness. So, in the English language, our word health comes from the Old English word hail, and hail meant to be whole. So obviously, if you're driving down the highway and get involved in a car crash, the EMTs arrive and they do what they do. And in that instance, that's medicine. That's what you need to become whole. But wholeness involves a lot more than just physical healing, a lot more than procedures and drugs and pharmacology. So in one instance, wholeness could be a teaching, which makes you realize a larger portion of yourself. So wholeness ultimately is having access to all parts of who you are, your full identity and your full powers. So yeah, I mean, medicine could be anything. It could be a ritual or a ceremony. It could be a process. It could be a teaching. It could be therapy. So medicine ultimately is anything in the context that you're in that will bring you closer to accessing your full power and identity. So.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful description. And like you said, it can be anything. A lot of people kind of, they either overuse that word, kind of like what you're hinting at, or they think it's like something you get at the pharmacy, which would be really cool if you can just find your purpose at the pharmacy. That'd be great.
Yeah.
But you summed that up really well. I like that description a lot. And it's in finding that medicine. I'm sure you can relate to this. Would be it is your purpose, but it's a process and it's a lifelong journey at the same time. And I was kind of leading into our other question because reading your bio and people hearing your bio, you've done so much of this work and quest work and programs and workshops with the heroic journey as well. And I'm sure a lot of listeners on here already know what a vision quest is, but there might be a lot of listeners and viewers who don't know what a vision quest is, because that's another word that can have a lot of dogma attached to it or confusion. So I guess in your own words and description as well, and this is going to ask probably the question you get a lot is, what is a vision quest? And like, why would I want to go, and who goes to these?
Yeah, so there's more than one question in that. One is, what's a vision quest, and another question is, what's vision? So let me just say is that a vision quest, I would say, is in the way that it's used today. A vision quest is it's a ritual process, and that people undertake, and there are, I wouldn't say there's a lot of us, but there's definitely less than 50 people in the United States who really lead vision quests, and of people who do it full time, there's less than 10. But basically, the way it's structured is that a vision quest involves three elements. It involves solitude, where you're completely alone and you're out of range of not only human conversations, but human interactions. You don't have cell phones and cameras and distractions like iPods. So it involves three elements. One is isolation. Two is nature. You're mostly in wilderness. So you literally leave behind the human world of, roads, cars, houses, showers, and you enter a world that the human world has all been created by humans. We live in a world that we created, and we're inside it. But when you enter wilderness, you step outside the world humans created, and you enter a world that actually created humans. Wilderness and nature is the world that humans evolved out of. So there's isolation, there's the time spent in wilderness, and then the third element is fasting. You go without food for some length of time, usually for 4 days and nights. That's kind of the traditional way. Some organizations do it maybe a little less, but so it's this process of preparation, getting ready to undertake that journey. And that preparation involves a lot of counseling, teaching, working with one's intentions, working with what's not working in one's life and one has to say goodbye to. And then after that preparation, the man or the woman goes into nature, let's just say for 4 days and nights, fasting and out of touch with other human beings, and to be really in touch with this larger world that humans came out of. And then after that time, he or she comes back into, I will say, into the community, but initially it's the small community of the people that one goes out with, and then kind of tells and shares what happened and what it meant to him or her. And then there's a process of integration, going into what that might mean in terms of one's life and how to bring it back into the world that the person left to come do this. And so a vision quest is, engaged in that, is to engage with that process. For people who are unfamiliar with it, I mean, a lot of times when people who know nothing about a vision quest ask me, I say, well, it involves these three elements. And then I say, and you've heard about it before. And I say, Christ went into the desert and fasted for 40 days. That was a vision quest. Buddha walked into the forest and fasted and became illumined and enlightened. That was a vision quest. Muhammad went into a cave and fasted and had his great vision. That was a vision quest. So in some sense, you know, a lot of people today think it's some esoteric, far-off thing, but virtually almost every major religion and spiritual movement had its, at least at its start, involved vision questing. So it's this profound encounter with something that's outside of yourself and vastly larger. And in the vision quest tradition, that's nature.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm always amazed too, on, I just have guided quests before, like when the people who show up and the reasons why, and it all starts with, you know, that pull. Some people call it the pull, or the calling. You know, I have this calling, or I have this feeling. It can be however you describe it, but it's something outside of yourself, like you're saying, that's pulling me to do this. But and then the participant would always be like, and even myself when I'm doing it, like I remember my first one, be like, but I don't know why. So we're trying to find the meaning on why we're supposed to do it. And once you get past that, like the surrendering to it and just showing up and just being human, that's how you get so much out of it. And there's so many different reasons why somebody would want to do a vision quest, like you're saying. Seeing people like marking a 50th birthday, or they're turning 21. A lot of people think, you know, these vision quests are a young adult just to become an adult, but you know, there's so much more reasons. And it's not just for young adults to adults. And I'm sure you could expound on that too.
Yeah.
I'm like, why somebody would show up. There's hundreds of reasons why somebody would show up for a vision quest.
Yeah, although, I mean, there can be hundreds of individual reasons, but my sense is there's only 3 or 4 general reasons.
Right.
And for me, those 3 or 4 general reasons and it's kind of the basics of what Joseph Campbell talks about in the journey. Sometimes people are just called to go. And like you say, they don't know why. It's just some urge in them that they need to do this. And they need to follow something. So the people who are called are following something, and so they go on a vision quest because they're following and seeking something. Now that seeking might be something like, I want to find my purpose in this life. I want to find what I've come here for. I want to find my medicine, my gift, what I have to give to the world. So I think some people come because they're called. I think some people come because they're in transition. I mean, it's kind of like they've been swept up in something, like the myth, you know, like Alice, the tornado comes and picks her up and she lands in Oz, or the sailors in the mist, they think they're heading somewhere and the storm takes them somewhere else. Some people come because something has happened in their life that just causes them, I have to look at life in a different way. That could be they get divorced, they lose their house, a child has died, you know, and all of a sudden, all the things that they've lived for, all of a sudden don't matter or don't make sense anymore. And it's like, oh my God, my life, the rug has been pulled out from under me. I have to find a way to, come back and live in a different way. One of the things you mentioned is a rite of passage. You know, some people come to perform a rite of passage, but there are dozens of different kinds. The traditional one is always puberty, the boy or the girl becoming a man, the child becoming an adult. And then there's many, quote, smaller ones, such as, you know, retirement, the end of a career, you know, the end of a marriage. And so moving from single to divorced, or moving from becoming a parent and that transition. And those rites of passage can be external, like puberty or a new career or retirement, or they can be internal. I've lived my whole life as a victim, and I need to move into a different way of engaging the world. And then, and I think the last big, well, another generic reason is essentially because things are unsustainable. The way I'm going, whether it's on the treadmill or I can't just live my life this way forever, or it's meaningless. So this sense of it can't go on the way it is, and the search for something new. And then and some people, I think, come just for renewal. They remember the passion and joy of life as a child, and here they are, they're whatever, 20, 30, 40, and it's going, where did that go? I have to get it back.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's well said. And you also expound a lot on this, and not just your programs, of course, but then your book. We haven't talked about your book yet. I wonder if you want to expound a little bit on your book that was called Letters to the River, A Guide to a Dream Worth Living.
Yeah.
It actually addresses pretty heavily the heroic journey which you're talking about.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can even give a little, here we go, right there.
Awesome.
I'll just say that book years ago, the way that book started was I'd always in my life written a lot, and I'd written a lot, and then I'd had some things published in magazines, and then but I always felt this kind of frustration with doing it, because I always felt like, oh my God, there's some editor out there or some audience, and I have to write to please them. And I had so much resistance to writing that way. And so anyway, I did this process of non-dominant handwriting, and I kind of talked about the frustration of that and where it came from. And I got a lot of great information that, that somehow I was still writing to please my father, who was going to judge whatever I did. And after all this information, I kind of, again, in my dominant hand, wrote, what do I do about it? And then I put the pen into my non-dominant hand and said, write to the river. So write to the stream. So I started writing these letters of sometimes description, but praise to the natural world, to the ocean, the river, whatever was in front of me. And, within a few years, I had like 700 of them. Way too much for, you can't just dump a load like that on the public. But then when it came time to organize it, I decided that I needed to organize it, and I wrote it in terms of a heroic journey, and the heroic journey is first, the hero is the call to adventure. So I wrote the book as it had 9 the first half of the book had 9 chapters. The first 3 are on the call to adventure and the need for a new mythology about the kind of myths that we lead and how they trap us in a world that's way too small for us. It talked about the known and the unknown, that we live in the world of the known and we're so attached to it, and the need for us to move out of the known into the unknown, enter a more vibrant world. So the book was basically, the first 3 chapters were about what the call to adventure meant to a person living in an ordinary life. And then the second 3 chapters were kind of entering the second part of the heroic journey, is called the realm of primal forces, when you get out of the known and enter, like on a vision quest, when you leave base camp and you go out into the wilderness, and oh my God, it's just me with no distractions. It's like ways of engaging the unknown. And I just talked to, and that was all about living in a world that was vibrant, that was alive, and having to encounter it viscerally, emotionally, sensually, and means instead of through the mind. And so, and then the last 3 chapters of the book were really about how to bring that home, how to bring all of that, the energy and the teachings of those encounters back into the world, and what we needed to address in the world and ourselves to do it. So yeah, that book was really, I tell you, it was a love of the heart, writing that. I mean, partly because it started by just writing to the natural world, which is, and I'm sure you can relate to this, just a place I love and feel at home and like fully alive in. So this book was about a way, hopefully, that spoke in a broader sense of how people might do that and what they needed to address and what they needed to do in order to do that. So yeah, that anyway, that was where that book came from, and yeah, it was just a joy, um, um, and it was like these letters I would write to the natural world. At times I felt like, oh my God, this is a love letter. This is a love letter. And then at times I'd be writing and I'd say, wait a minute, I'm not writing to the natural world. The natural world's writing out of me, So there was this, in the process of it, there was this great kind of softening and eliminating of the boundaries between me and the natural world, where that much more interactive in the way, like the difference between a daytime awareness and dreams. In dreams, the self and the world are totally interconnected. And in that book was about these ways that we could be in the world and not separate and observing and judging and deciding, how we could live in that world as a participant, as live in that world as and feel about ourselves in nature. It's not like, oh, I'm describing. It's just like, here I am and you, the tree and the river, and we're all in this story together. Yeah, and celebrating that. So yeah, that was an act of love writing that book, I gotta say. Yeah.
Well, I love how the book was birthed in like love and curiosity, and like your story of like the dominant hand and the non-dominant hand. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It's really fascinating. I like how you explain that.
Yeah.
And yeah, makes me aspire to go out and write more too. But to write in myth, like mythopoetically, is like a whole other, part of your brain, as well as trains of thought to write like that. And it's almost like we've forgotten not just how to write like that, but also how to think like that and to live life like in that kind of story, like how to live each day with a story. And that was kind of one of the other questions, is like, do you think these ancient myths, not just the ones you're writing about, but how we play these mythopoetic stories out, even in quests, like, do you think they're still relevant with people today?
Yeah. I guess when I feel like the audience is open, I'll take a fairly radical position. Um, and my radical position is, people often talk about vision quests. Oh, and vision and altered states and da, da, da. My radical position is ordinary reality is the altered state, and it's a totally dysfunctional altered state. And it would be an easy thing to just say, well, just look at CNN, and if you don't think it's a dysfunctional state, just look at the headlines, where people murdering each other. I mean, where lying is common, where 70% of the population is obese, and antidepressant, anxiety, and so. But I think the point I want to make for most people is, this is a Jungian archetypal psychology point of view, is that Jung once said this, that we humans have essentially 4 ways of knowing and interacting with the world. And we can know the world through our senses. We can know the world through sensing, and that's obvious to everyone. But we can also, the second one is we can also know the world through feeling, the kind of feelings of resonance and love and connection. So we can know the world in that kind of a kind of emotional sort of way. Third, we can know the world through thinking. We can observe things, judge them, measure them, et cetera, et cetera. And fourth, we can know the world in a way that he would say intuition and imagination. We can know like the kind of those symbolic interactions, those engagements like we have in dreams. And but Jung said these are four ways we can really know the world. And he's talking about not just the outer world, but the inner world. And you and I and most everybody I meet has been, have all been gone through compulsory education. And we've been taught that the way to know the world is through thinking, 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 and more thinking. And that all those other three ways of knowing, engaging the world are somehow suspect. It's just like, oh, your dreams. Well, come back to reality, meaning thinking. So I almost think that the common consciousness, and I experience this all the time, people coming to Vision Quest, is like how to engage them with the ways of knowing the world that are much more alive and much more participatory. Because as long as we're thinking about something, we're removed from it. Even the idea, the scientific method, the ideal of the objective experiment is that the experimenter is not involved in the experiment. The experimenter is removed, neutral, distant. And we have been it's just been ground into us from kindergarten through college and postgraduate to engage in that way of being in which we're in our heads and not in our bodies and not in our hearts and not in our dream and symbolic life. So what I find is that it certainly happens on Vision Quest because, part of partly the frame up of it is when you walk out of base camp and walk into the wilderness, when you literally leave that behind. You're leaving behind the human-created environment of roads and telephone lines and all of that, but you're leaving behind the intellectual environment because you're leaving behind your smartphones and your books and you're leaving behind human conversation. So you're essentially starting to choke off that kind of human to human mode of awareness in which we've learned that we're humans. We're the top of the heap. The whole thing was created for our entertainment or our dominion, and so we kind of, as we literally leave back behind, and certainly on a Vision Quest, you're totally into the sensory world. You have to deal with weather and wind and animal and plant and landscape. But also, as you take away all those other things, it's like the world of dream, the world, things start to bubble up that have, you think of people you haven't thought of in 20 years. And all of a sudden they're there. And then part of the other, part of Vision Quest is there's a lot of teachings about ritual and ceremony. And ritual, it's probably not time here to get into a whole conversation teaching about ritual and ceremony, but ritual is the language of the old brain. Engaging in ritual is a way to get into ways of being and knowing that are not linear, rational, and so it's ways of engaging in a deep way that kind of are way past, that get us out of this thinking rational mind and into those other spaces. So I even forgot where the question started, but at this point.
No, that's the whole flow of these interviews. Like, we can go down any rabbit hole you want to go down. That was, this is for the people listening and viewing, that's just kind of, we're all on this journey together through this conversation. But yeah, thanks for expounding on that. And it kind of goes, I mean, not kind of goes in, this also goes into kind of a question that sparked in the middle. We were talking about this journey and combining it with quest work, as well as like long-term kind of work, and like rites of passage work as well. And one of your programs that I myself have also been just really fascinated with is your Mythic Warrior training program.
Yep.
And I was wondering, it's not one of the questions I had lined up, but it did spark kind of a conversation on that. If you wanted to talk about how you kind of use this mythopoetic teaching, the heroic journey, and how it's used in the Mythic Warrior training program.
Yeah, I mean, that's in the Mythic Warrior, and most of the vast majority of my programs are co-ed, but there's these two programs specifically that are just for men, and one's the Mythic Warrior, and the Mythic Warrior is a program that happens one weekend a month for 9 months, and so and that goes through it's kind of the choreography is the heroic journey. The first 3 months are about, again, and the call to adventure is about leaving home, leaving behind those things and severing from those things that don't work for you. The rules and laws, the laws, the things that you learn from your mother, your father, the culture, the priests, or the teachers that keep you small, that keep you separate, that keep you fearful. So it's kind of working with what you need to leave behind that's just not working. So the Mythic Warrior is one that happens one weekend a month for 9 months, so 9 weekends. And the Men's Wisdom Council is one that lasts a week. And in that one, each year we take one particular myth and story, and we kind of play it out. And we use as the week goes on, we kind of play it out, but you use the myth and the story and what it brings up to work with our deeper issues. So, I mean, one year we used the myth of Perseus, and here's Perseus facing Medusa, this gorgon with snakes for hair, and if he looks at her, he'll be turned to stone. And so we play that out and we do rituals of, but it's a great thing to bring up of man's, we in the men's group, we use that as man's fear of the frightening feminine. It's like our fear of the dark feminine who's going to turn us to stone and freeze us and paralyze us, and and our desire to battle that so it doesn't dominate our lives. And another year we'll use the myth of Odysseus, the Odyssey. This I've spent 10 years just being at war. How do I get home? After how many years I've learned how to go out and battle the world and be a breadwinner, how do I get back to my child and my partner? And how do I get back to love after learning all this? And so we use that. So we use these myths because myths speak to a deeper core of us. Myths are archetypal, and that's probably another word that could be gone into. But myths speak to parts of us that are. You mind if I go on a little tangent? I want to just talk about. So a lot of if you didn't take psychology in college or go into archetypal psychology, that word archetype may feel hazy or what's it talking about. But the way I would define an archetype is a pattern in the human mind. So most people, so it's pretty common if I said the 4 directions, everybody would know what I mean. But if you were on a boat way out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you would just see this flat horizon all the way around you. The whole circle Why is that divided into 4 directions?
Mm.
It could be divided into 3 or 5 or 7. It could, 7 directions of 52 degrees each, but it's always divided into 4. So it's like we have 4 directions, we have 4 seasons, spring, summer, winter, fall. We have 4 times a day, morning, midday, evening, night. We have 4 elements, earth, air, fire, and water. We have 4 ways of knowing the world, sensing, feeling, think. The reason it's all divided into 4 is because that's a pattern in the human brain. And things make sense to us as humans if it makes sense to us if there's 4 directions. It doesn't make sense to us if there's 7. But that's not about the world. It's a pattern in the human brain. And so things like, things like rites of passage, severance, and so there are big patterns. The big ones are in math are about 3 and 4, but there are things that only make sense if they come in archetypal forms. So the heroic journey is an archetypal story. It makes sense. And the medicine wheel teachings in 4 directions, those are archetypes. They make sense. And it's almost like if they're given to us, in a different way, we don't get them. So these things like, rites of passage, severance, incorporation, severance, threshold, incorporation, the heroic journey, the call to adventure, realm of primal forces, the return, or the Hindu deities, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, creator, maintainer, destroyer. So anyway, a lot of the reason that these things come, and myths are all in archetypal form. And so they have this power over us that lasts for, myths are what, thousands of years old. Whatever the popular movie of today is not going to last 3,000 years. So it's just, there were certain traditional forms, when I think this talk was described as ancient medicine for the modern world, there are certain traditional forms that are still active in us. And if we try and live our lives as if we're rational, just totally rational, that everything has to be linear, scientific, this huge part of our deeper self is like going, hello, because it gets left out. And so, myth, ritual and ceremony, heroic journeys, vision quest are all medicines that come in an archetypal form and speak to places in us that don't get spoken to if we just use rational language. And if we want to know our wholeness, we're not going to get there by just rational thinking. We will not get there. One of the things that I share with people, on Vision Quest, I always give these a general teaching about ritual and ceremony before I teach all of the possible rituals and ceremonies they could do on their quest. But one of the things that when I talk about ritual as the language of the old brain, I mean, basically there's the reptile brain, which is the instinctual part of us. And then there's the limbic system, which is, it's called the midbrain or the mammalian brain, which has a lot to do with our emotional world and how we feel about the life we're in. And then the third brain is the neocortex, the rational brain, the one that all of us have spent, 12 or 16 years of schooling developing. But one of the things I tell people, if you want to know where the power in your life is, think about this. Your rational brain, if you just looked at it as an information processor, your rational brain can process 40 bits of information a second. 40 bits of information a second. In that same second, your limbic system is processing 40 million bits a second. So these lower parts, which are kind of below the rational level, are processing 1,000,000 times more information than our rational brain. And so my thing is, if you want to make real changes in your life and connect with your whole self, you have to find ways to, you could call it drop down, or imagine, it's almost like I imagine a ground and there's a well there. You have to find ways to drop that bucket down and bring up material from that far vaster part of who we are. Some people call it the subconscious, some people call it the dream world, some people call it the archetypal realm. But but that part of who we are is, 1,000,000 times more powerful than our rational mind. So we got to get there.
Yeah. Got to get there, and then we all
got to bring it back. You got to bring it back up.
How do we get back up? And then we ask that question, oh, how do we get there? And then you're back up into the mind again, because you're always asking the how.
But I think that question is valuable, the how.
Yeah.
It's just like there's a lot of ways to drop into that, ritual and ceremony, that'll drop us down, ritual and ceremony of all sorts, vision quests and various things, plant medicine ceremonies, that'll drop us down, shamanic journeying, that will drop us down into that realm. Various techniques like holotropic breath work, that will drop us down, bring material up. There are many ways to drop into that and then bring some of that rich source of life, up. And some people are just naturally drawn more to one than another.
Right. I was having a conversation actually just a while ago with a teacher of mine who was talking about this, like dropping in and staying there. And of course, talking to him about like more of the how. And it's kind of asked like the question. I was like, well, how do you do it? He's just like kind of talking about it a lot, and he just, it was so funny. He just looks at me and he goes, and there was like a silence of like 10 seconds. And he's just staring at me, and so of course, like I was brought out of the context there. And I was like, well, this is weird. He's just staring at me, and I was like, he's like, I was just there. I just love that. So he's just talking about, it can be so hard. We can think so hard about, like you're saying, we can rationalize about it, but a lot of it's just being the state of being and just being still, still in the mind and in the body. And I kind of like how you talked about that. Like we need to be in a different state of being to be there. And when you over rationalize it, you're never going to get there. It's like you said, like the latest movie is never going to be really the myth. And so you're also creating, in the process, like you're saying, we're creating this myth about ourselves and like this deeper poetic way of being. It's so mind blowing to me, but also at the same time, if you think about it, sometimes it can be so simple once we're in that state.
I think it's both simple and not simple.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's true. All you got to do is just be in the present. But that's not easy for people who've been. One, it's not easy for people who've highly intellectual and trained to be intellectual. Getting out of their heads is like, almost impossible for those people. They have to have techniques and ways to work at it. For other people have severe trauma and, had trauma and they're full of anxiety, depressed, or feel this core sense of shame. But they want to avoid that present. To them, the present is like awful. So there's a tendency just to seek addictions to it. So for other people, the way to get there means you have to deal with all that. You have to drop into the swamp, but with tools. You need to drop into the swamp with tools to kind of heal and integrate and find this place where you can hold all that and be bigger than it at the same time. Because just trying to avoid it is essentially what distraction or addiction is your favorite. You know? So
Right.
yeah, just being in the present. You know, I mean, it always sounds good, but it's just not easy um, for most people. I mean, most people have been either in some ways trained trained or through their personality trained through their trauma and their personal history convinced that being in the present is the exactly worst place to be. So
Yeah. Good description too. And like you said, it's a journey. I mean, we're always going to be trying to get there, and you'll be there maybe for a couple of seconds one day, and then takes you years to get back there.
yeah.
And then we have all these tools and teachers and communities that can help us with that. And then another thing that's kind of raised popularity now, which I hear about all the time. I'll have a friend being call up the other day. I'm like, oh, I did a Hawaii ayahuasca ceremony and it changed my life. And I always kind of ask, well, why? Why did you do the ceremony? And because a lot of times, this stuff has a lot of dogma attached to it too. Because there's a big interest of like you mentioned Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. And so there's all these practices accessible to us, and and they do have a place in healing us and helping us find better connections to ourselves. So question to that was do you see these psychedelic experiences such as ayahuasca and compared to all these other practices, do you see them having a place of healing our communities in the world?
I'll say yes. But it's a yes with a few asterisks. It's, when I use that example of, we're so trained to just live in our conscious mind, and all of that deeper part of ourselves, we're so rational and can't stop thinking, so we can't get there, or we don't have the tools to get there. So on the one hand, all of those plant medicines, ayahuasca, psilocybin, iboga, MDMA, will get us down into that deeper part of ourselves. That's the plus. Just like other things, shamanic journeying, holotropic breathwork, that will also. But to me, the danger of it's not so much the danger of the medicine itself is when I hear someone say, I took an ayahuasca journey and it changed my life. I'll be blunt and I'll just say, I think I'm hearing bullshit. If my response is, if you took an ayahuasca journey and it opened up in a different world, then how are you going to change your life? And how are you going to do that back in this world? Because if it only changed your life while you were on the journey, then so what? So, and so I think that for me, the danger of, I hate using that word, but one of the drawbacks of things like ayahuasca and psilocybin, it so fits in the cultural perspective. It's I don't have to have intention, purpose, work. I just take this thing. I take the pill, or or the ayahuasca or the mushroom. I just take it, and it's so passive. And my experience is real change takes work. Real change takes a lot of work. I mean, part of the process, I think ayahuasca and those things, plant medicine, can give great insights, but making them real takes work. Or, rather than, oh, that was great, I got to do another ceremony next week and another one the week after.
Right.
It's just oh, you just want to live in the other world. You don't want to bring that energy back into this one. You just want to live there. You want to leave this one, because when you're in this one, that's where all the problems are. So, so I think it can have great potential in terms of opening up kind of a new vision or a new possibility, for love, for connection, a new sense of your inherent goodness. But how's that going to translate when you show up at work on Monday morning? How's it going to translate when your kid's throwing a tantrum? How's that going to translate? So, so I think that's, that's where the rubber hits the road. And so.
Yeah. And just like, not really expound on that, but to relate to what you're saying, I'm glad you explained that, because you and I are definitely on the same page. I just see that a lot with people, and like the question of how, like, okay, that's cool, whatever, but then how? What are you going to do after? Like, how are you going to integrate this? And I like to take that step of even further. Like, you've had this life changing. It could be from psychedelics, or it could just be from being in nature with others, or quests, or just. So you're growing, you're growing into your gifts. You might have just found out your life purpose and even your gifts. So then, like, how are you going to take that to your community? And like, that's the big question. It's not, so it kind of puts you out of yourself. Like, we're in this mindset of humans, is like, this life is all about me. And like, what I'm experiencing is me. And so, the real human, of course, is they're finding that out, but then like, what community can support them so they can present this back to their community? That's the whole point of this summit, even. Like, so like, people are growing into their gifts and they're needing help get into their life purpose, but who's supporting you, and who truly knows you, who you are, like that soul, your soul.
Yeah.
And then, because that's what soul needs. It needs that connection. So just relating to what you're saying, like, the question of how, and then like, but also like, who's supporting you in this, and then can they see that? Kind of like that old saying, like, I know, like, I can definitely, that happened to me all the time when I was little, like, oh, I know your parents do that too, like, oh, I know what your gifts are because I can see that in you. And of course you're like, oh, I don't see that, because like, other people can sometimes see you as you are, but sometimes you can't. And so that's why I always encourage it to, even like the people listening and what you're saying now, it's like, you're at these big questions in life, the how, the when, whatever, but who's supporting you, and like, what community can you bring those gifts to that will let it play out, who will leverage that?
Yeah, that's I do a lot of different things, a lot of different workshops and programs, but kind of the kind of core where I started and still central to me is the Vision Quest. And certainly that the question at the end of a Vision Quest is, after people have gone out of nature and had this big opening and these insights, and the question is, well, what gifts do you have to give to your people? And that's really two questions. That, the first question is, what are your gifts? What is it that's in you that you need to bring forth? And so that's the first question. But the second question, especially today in the world we live in, is, who are your people? 1,000 years ago, that was an easy question to answer. Who are your people? My village. Simple question, done. But now, who are your people? Are they your 800 Facebook friends? Are they the people you work with? And so, to me, I really kind of need to kind of push that question on people, and just say, it is important. You have to decide, and any individual can have his or her different answers. So one person's answer might be my spouse and my kids, and that works for them, but it doesn't work for a lot of people. So another person's answer might be, my people are everyone who's in recovery from addiction, and that might be true. Somebody else, it's everyone working for peace and justice, or we, in some sense, we have to define a community where we can express. It's just, there's been seeds planted in us, and part of the process we discover what those seeds are, and the task of our life is to learn how to water them and nurture them and fertilize them and cultivate them so they'll flower and bear fruit. But we also have to know who they're going to feed, and so you know, it's kind of like I had this sort of the very first vision quest I ever did myself was in 1980, and at that point I knew it was going to be a big part of my life. But I think if I'd come home to, you know, Putney, Vermont, and driven down to Brattleboro and announced this purpose at the American Legion Hall bar, it would have been the wrong people. So it's just like, well, who are the people? You know, the way I put it is, there are seeds in us that need to grow, and our our community is, where is there fertile soil for that to happen? And nowadays, it's a lot harder to find fertile soil than it was 1,000 years ago when we lived in villages, and so. But it's a really important task, and one of the things I really liked, certainly in the title of this summit, was bringing it to your community. But you know, today's society is so complicated, of class and all these divisions. It's like humans were made to live in small communities. They weren't made to live in communities of thousands and millions and billions. And so we need to find those kind of small communities in which, I mean, all 99.99% of human evolution took place in small communities. Civilization is a few thousand years old, but you know, there were 2.5 million years of small human groups, and that's, again, archetypally and psychologically, that's how we're wired. So we need to have these kind of strong visionary experiences, medicine experiences, deep experiences of the soul. But then we need to find those people, you know, not 7 billion people. We can't bring our gifts to 7 billion people. We can bring our gifts to 30, 40, 100, maybe 150, and who knows? We have no idea how the ripples will go. We need to find and define and give our gifts to those communities. And
Right.
yeah, it's way more complicated than it used to be.
Yeah, and community, having people who will truly listen to who you are and without judgment is the big one.
Yeah.
And of course, have elders and a mentoring community.
Yeah.
And that could be in a whole other hour of like what the community.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
But we're at the top of the hour too, and I want to leave the last couple minutes up to you to expound or maybe catch up on something that you wanted that we missed, or missing anything.
I guess what I want to say is, you know, I've spent my life, for me, what was important is that where is my commit, that ultimately, I think this life, you know, when I come to the end of my life, what I want to know is I'm going to kind of meet that great energy somehow, whatever name you would put on it. And I want to come to that point, and just my question is, have I been true to you? I mean, I call it the great mystery. Have I been true to you? And the sense is that this life, it's like it's kind of mine, but it's not. My life was created by you, great mystery, and you planted these things in me. Did I tend them and bring them forward? And so, to me, I mean, I say that, and part of me just wants to cry, and I'm moved, and it's so important to me, and it also feels so rich. And I would like whoever hears this to have that experience. Whoever hears this to say, no, your purpose in this life is not to please your father and mother, nor your lover, nor your kids, or some definition of success you get from somewhere else. Your purpose in this life is to find that deep relationship between you and the mystery and serve it. And if you serve it, not serving society, not serving the culture, if you serve it, then your life will be rich and full of joy and wonder and passion. And And I just want to say that's the most important relationship of your life. And I just want to encourage people to remember that and find those people in their lives who can help them remember that, who will support them in remembering that. And I think if we do, then the chips of whether you're rich and poor and this and that, those can fall where they may, and it's totally secondary.
Hold on a second. 1 second. Sorry. What a way to interrupt those sacred words. Somebody just. Yeah. Those are just such sacred words, and thank you for sharing that wisdom with us at the end there, and of course this whole talk. Same. I mean, likewise, as I'm hoping our listeners will really hear that and seek that, and I'm not going to really expound on that because I want to leave that sacred space open. But I just want to thank you so much, Sparrow, for leaving all of us with that sacred wisdom and your knowledge and our talk today. It was, to me, very inspiring and also empowering. And I hope that was the same for our listeners and our speakers. That door opening threw me off. Our listeners and our viewers today. And also the other speakers who will be watching your call. So this thank you, many, many thanks. And I just hope you have a fantastic and beautiful rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you. It's been really good for me talking to you. And you had that interruption. The painter is scraping paint off the wall, right? But I felt really tuned into this conversation and to you, and it's been a joy.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and have a beautiful day. Appreciate it.
All right. Blessings to you.
Many blessings. Bye.
Bye-bye.